What I plan to do in the next 30 or 35 minutes is dive into a little bit more of the technical side of what makes for great Bordeaux. I call it sun, rain, and stress. And I will also be including a segment of how we in Boston for the last 15 years have been analyzing and predicting the quality of different vintages. And it's helped us in our futures purchase strategy. And this is the first time that we've really unveiled it. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you ask a lot of questions about it. There is a tricky dimension here because this begins to quantify how good or how bad the vintage may be. And so our friends, our wonderful friends in Bordeaux can be somewhat anxious about the fact that we're quantifying how good the vintage is. But nevertheless, I think it's data, you should know about it, and I hope it's useful. I started by looking at just what's happening to the average summer temperature in Bordeaux. This is, on the right-hand scale is degrees Celsius, and on the bottom is 1952 through 2015. And the average summer temperature is defined as the average temperature between April through September. Fair enough? So it's the growing season. It's the time when you get your Cabernet to ripen and the Cabernet Franc. And this is, well, as I said, it's simply data. Okay? These are the data. What observations do you have from the data? Getting warmer. You may believe or not in the Paris Accord, and I'm not here to sort of, confirm or deny global warming. I will just say these are the temperatures in Bordeaux since 1952 going forward. Good news is we're getting a lot of really great juice out of these warmer summers. The bad news is we may all need to start planting Commanderie like Brian Cantonac is experimenting with, because you do need to look out 20 years and see what the implications are for the varietals you're planting. I was able then to extend this data series going backwards in time, which was intriguing to me, because if you just look at 52 forward, you see one trend. If you go back in time, you see that the phenomenally hot year of 2003 that we all talk about, that we tasted at lunch, that we all recognize as a phenomenally hot year, was the same in 1947 and the same in 1893. So while the trend here is predominantly up, there have been certain hot points in the past that we should pay attention to. I don't know, who's tasted a 47? Which one? Cheval Blanc 47. Good? Yeah, phenomenal wine. Lynn? The Latour 47, and it was very nice. Others? I know I had the chance a couple of years ago to meet the grand old man, the winemaker at La Conseillante after the war. And I asked him about 47. He said, "Oh la la, c'était impossible." He said, the vats were so hot to the touch, and the weather was so hot, and we had to pack ice around the vats to keep the temperature down while we made the wine. And so it's interesting to me that how much of Bordeaux and Bordeaux quality is in fact driven by temperature. Clearly, since 1952, it's been increasing, but maybe it's flat overall. So that's part of the rolling of the dice we have if you're in Bordeaux. If you're in Bordeaux, as you know, you're betting on weather, and the weather is incredibly variable, and it's driving the issue. So if we paint global warming based on 52 forward, you can get a picture like this that says maybe by 2040 we're going to have to be grappling with much higher levels. Or you can go back, and I'll do that for you tonight. I'll do the regression line from all of 1893 through to 2015. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's not really known, I don't think, or appreciated. And it's the legacy of these two gentlemen, Bruno Prats and Orley Ashenfelter. Bruno Prats, you no doubt know, is the former owner of Coast Esternel, a very distinguished winemaker. And Bruno had a conversation with Orley, who is a labor economist at Princeton and a great wine lover. And that conversation happened, I think, about 25 years ago, about what drives fundamentally quality in Bordeaux. And Bruno said, well, it's really all summer weather and harvest rain. And those are the key major variables that tell you whether you're going to have a wonderful, ripe harvest in Bordeaux. So Orley, being someone who quantifies things, went ahead and started collecting data on the Bordeaux weather and did his magic in terms of regression analysis and ended up with a view of how you might predict the quality of Bordeaux based on these parameters. And if you dig into the history, there's a great article, this is where I first came upon it. There's a New York Times article from 1990 entitled, "Wine Equation Puts Some Noses Out of Joint." Have you tasted a 10 yet? Have you tasted a bad 10 yet? No. Okay, have you tasted a 9 yet? Have you tasted a bad 9? Your Honor, I rest my case. Lacking imagination when I went through the sort of detailed grist of this, I used just average Parker ratings for the vintage to look at whether these data were predictive, and they were tight on that level. Now, honestly, I have not done it for the last 2 or 3 years to see what's going on with the 10 versus 15 question, but it merits taking another look at. And here is the long term from 1892 through to 2015 of harvest rain. And I would say in general, the variable, if you were a production analyst and looking at these data to get steady, predictable production, you would throw your hands up in the air, because the variable that drives Bordeaux more than anything else in terms of quality, I think, is rainfall. And I've had to pick between the two. I would pick for those low levels of harvest rain, which brings us back again to 2009, 2010, and we'll see where the rest pan out. What if we did a scatter chart of, on the horizontal axis, millimeters of harvest rainfall, and on the vertical degrees Celsius? Does this, in general, if you move towards the upper left-hand corner, does it in fact predict those vintages which we think are quality vintages? So as a general pattern, what do you see emerging from this scatter chart? Pretty good vintages in the upper left-hand corner. It says that, yes, I'm not sure I can answer the 2015 versus the 2010 question, but if you take 100 years of data and look at where they show up, at least there's an indication that you've got some pretty interesting vintages in the upper left-hand quadrant. Other observations?
A lot of people say, don't poo-poo 03 because it's so much like 47.
Don't poo-poo 03 because it's so much like 47. And so those are the people who are supporting 03 and saying it's like the 47, presumably. Right, right. The other dimension that I thought was interesting in this chart is to color code the decades. So as you look at a general pattern of where we're going from, let me see, the 80s are in blue, The 90s are in green, and the 2000s are in red. So, as I said when we started, the good news about whatever is happening here, and you could believe or not believe global warming, at least on the set of data that we're considering, there's an interesting trend towards the upper left-hand corner. And that's good, not only for all the wonderful classified growths that Michael was talking about, but also for the Petit Chateau and the unclassified Bordeaux's and the other 90% of Bordeaux that we tend to not pay any attention to in the Commanderie. And it makes me wonder if now is the time to get more serious about finding those gems that are unclassified but are being supported by the trends in the weather as we move forward. So whatever that movement back and forth generally is on rainfall, less in the last 10 or 15 years. And I don't know what's driving the rainfall trends, but I will observe that overall, it's making some pretty good juice for us in Bordeaux, which I appreciate. When I first did this, and it was about 15 years ago, that's when I told someone last night that there was a good correlation between the Parker scores and these data, except for 86, which, according to these data, don't show up as being a very good year. According to the scores, are ostensibly a super year. And so for me, that was enough to question whether we should invest heavily in 86, just as taking the hedge. Now, going to the next level, this is work that Dewey Markham shared with me. And his thesis is that to have a perfect vintage, you need 5 conditions, not just the 2 I was dealing with. For a perfect vintage, you need early rapid flowering, slight water stress during the fruit set, severe water stress just before color change, the veraison, optimum leaf function up to harvest time, so you don't want to starve your leaves for the capacity to operate, and then good weather, low rain during the harvest. And so his view is more expansive than mine. I find this also useful to take into account. His chart is an interesting one to look at these 5 variables and begin to rate the vintages yes, no with green and red checks relative to those dimensions. Now, I have the data on 2015, and 2015 is 5 green checks as well. I don't have the data yet on 2016 or 2017, but the nice thing about this data set is you don't have to dig far deep into the bowels of Météo France to get the information. You can actually go to the website of the Grand Conseil that describes the vintage and the harvest and the weather, and allows you to basically fill in these 5 categories with the actual, it's in French, so you need to be able to read French, but it allows you to understand what these variables are like in each of the years. What Dewey says is you can overwhelm the leaves with too much sunshine, and the function of the leaf shuts down such that it impairs with the process of getting to maturity in the grapes themselves. Hubert de Boer from Angelou talked about the challenges in 2003, the heat, particularly in August, and the fact that it shut down the function of the leaves, and you could actually just look from the road as you drove along as to who was in trouble by the fact that their leaves were no longer producing the function that it needed.